shields all the way up. And many of you I saw were probably quite stumped by her breasts being like thorns grazing. More likely than not, this is like a farmer looking on two thorns from behind and seeing their little tails look like nipples. So, like that is what these two boobs look like. So, very scary looking woman to us, but in that day, beautiful, just gorgeous. So how do we read the Song of Songs? We really only have the first sort of commentary on Song of Songs, 100 AD, and that's by a Jewish rabbi. And he says, if you read the Song of Songs like it is a book about sex, you are a child of the devil, you have no place in heaven. This is most definitely the holiest of holy books because it is about the Israelites and their Father God. This is about the Israelites who are like the bride and the story of their relationship with their groom, who is Yahweh. Now we do see, like in books like Hosea, where God is saying, and using the metaphor of a relationship with a marriage to describe his relationship with Israel. But when you look at what an allegory is, you have to stretch things pretty far to make them work, okay? Not only that, with that one, some people say it's actually a book about the Israelites coming up out of Egypt and into the Promised Land. So how they got there from what they read is very interesting. So Christians picked up on this and they said, yeah, this whole bride and groom, the groom is God, the bride is the church. They picked up on that and they ran with it until mid-19th century. It came because of this classic misunderstanding. That the flesh is evil, the spirit is good. Sex is so all-encompassing and fuels so much of your passions and desires to a place where it almost looks like worship and you lose your self-control. Therefore, it is the pinnacle of the flesh. And those who are so holy and spiritual will not indulge in this fleshly, sinful activity. For most spiritual people will never have anything to do with sex. And you see this in the church for a very long time. Whereas we know that God encompasses all of our lives, and there is no divide between the secular and the sacred. It is all holy unto God, including our sexuality. So he made it, he designed it, and he made it right. Alright. So how do we read Song of Songs? No, what happened in the mid-19th century? You probably want to know. Archaeological discovery. They started going, all right, let's try and find out more of what's going here. They found all these texts. And they're like, wow, there is a heap of erotic literature in the ancient Near East, and it's got a lot to do with wedding literature. They go, okay, so this is actually normal in this time. This is not something that is a spiritual thing between God and Israel. This is a person-to-person thing. Then they had more travel in that time as well. And Europeans went over to Eastern countries and they saw that they would actually read at the end of wedding feasts before the bride and groom would leave poetry that looks just like the poetry that we have in Song of Songs. And it was their blessing to go out and have fun tonight, enjoy yourselves, enjoy this pleasure that God has given you. And they go, okay, this obviously isn't simply a theological book. So this whole description of a person, we have seen it before, haven't we? So this is the classic poetry that they picked up, that they saw in those ancient Near Eastern texts. And is starting from the top of the head, going down to the feet. Or starting at the feet, moving its way all the way up to head, describing different things. We have seen this before in Ecclesiastes. Remember the old man whose eyes are failing, who's losing his hearing, his teeth aren't working very well, he can't taste as much, his bowels aren't working as well as they once used to, his legs aren't working well. This is classic poetry for that ancient Near East. So, okay, it's not an allegory, so is it a dramatic love story? Now, it is very obvious that King Solomon is in this book. But have a look, open up your Bibles to Song of Songs, chapter 1, verse 4. Chapter 1, verse 4 says, "Take me away with you. Let us hurry. Let the king bring me into his chambers." Yet not many verses after that. She's saying, "Tell me," verse 7, "Tell me, you whom I love, where you graze your flock, and where you rest your sheep at midday. Why should I be like the veiled woman who comes out beside the flocks of your friends?" So is this a king or is this a farmer? Or is the king Solomon all of a sudden a farmer and we just never knew about it? We talked about this a bit last week. Solomon is used as a king. He's used in the wedding feast in chapter 3. And it's saying how wonderful and amazing this is, but it's unlikely that this is the story of Solomon and this Shulamite woman, despite them using that terminology. Shulamite is actually the feminine for the masculine Solomon. It's the same name. And it's just an example. This is a person and they're part of this love story. So some other people go, yeah, it's not King Solomon and the Shulamite woman, but I can see that there is both a king and a farmer involved with this woman. Therefore, what Song of Songs is about this love triangle. And the king is trying to get the eye of this woman, but she's staying faithful to this farmer who she loves so much. And the whole book is about the tension between the two. It's an option. Another option that people come up with is that it's actually about the stages of marriage. That it goes from the wedding day into the honeymoon period, and then it goes on from there into, a bit more trials, and then it comes out and they learn about love in the end. And it's a very nice kind of journey that it takes you on. The problem with this kind of approach to the Song of Songs is that nobody can agree on any of these. So the fact that it's not clear enough that anyone can agree makes me think it might not be there. It could be there, and if you see it and God uses that to speak to you in that way, awesome, but it's likely that it's more reading into the text than what the text is actually saying. So if it's not that, what are we looking at? It's more than likely not a collection of love songs with the same thing. In my teenage years, I had a favourite CD, because we had CDs back then, because we were old. And it was Lauryn Hill's Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. And it had all these songs, and they were all different songs, and yet there was this story that would sort of run through all of the songs, and it wasn't a start to finish story, it was that they were all sort of different scenes in her life in the way that she was miseducated about love. And they all kind of came together as a collection. That's more like what this book is like. There are all these different verses or songs that could be on their own, but the author has come and put them all together, and sometimes put little refrains in there to help join them together to keep them actually making sense. But there's not a story that flows through, but it is thematic. All the stories are sort of hitting at the same point from one angle or another. So is it then about Christ and the church? In the same way that Jesus said that he is like the groom and that the church is like his bride, yes. Do we understand more of our relationship with God when we understand more about how marriage is intended to be? Absolutely yes. Absolutely. And should our sex life affect our relationship with God? Not in the way that we are saved, but should it be involved? Absolutely, yes. Does God care what we do with others? Yes. Does he have a plan? Yes. So in that way, it's a song of songs, big tick, but also in there, eventually by the way that we learn about marriage and how it's intended to be, and desire and sexuality, that actually affects, how we see our relationship with Christ, the intimacy with that. So what would our view of sexuality be without the Song of Songs? Think about that. Keep coming back to that as we go through this today. Because remember, we've had a lot of instances in the Bible where sex has been misused. Time after time up to this point. And we have a lot of do-nots. In the New Testament, we find a few more do's. In Proverbs, we find a few more do's. How to love your wife. May her breast satisfy you always. But it's very much a distant approach to sexuality throughout the rest of the Bible. So what Song of Songs does is provide us this insight to an area where they in their culture would have had much more of an understanding of what was going on. So it would have not really need to have been said as much as for us now who are so far removed and we need God to speak into this area because we need to know what God's plan is for this. Because the world has a plan for sex and it's going to tell you what it should look like, or even tell the church what the church should think about sex. But we should be able to look at our Bibles and see what God has planned all along for our sexuality. Significantly absent in the book of Song of Songs is God. There are a few different reasons people give for this. Mostly it's because that in this time period, there was a lot of worship of pagan gods using sex and orgies. And they were pleasing God and gaining favour from God in how extravagant their sexuality was to try and gain. And so in that regard, it was probably a bit of a distancing of that sort of a theology, that God is not some pervert in heaven going, oh, this is awesome. Whereas other cultures at the time would have been thinking that's the way that God's wrong, right? But there's also this element where this is like a wisdom book, in that this is the way that God has set things into order and this is the way that things should naturally be. So God's in the background, but he's not involved as in, you don't see him sitting there in the room through these descriptions. Also significantly absent in this book are children. Procreation. Which shows that sex is not primarily only for making babies. God actually made it for more reasons than that. For intimacy, for love. They are meant to desire one another, not just because they wanted to pop out a legacy, but because they loved one another, and it was a natural response. It was a physical thing, it was a spiritual thing, it was an emotional thing, and that is a good thing. What is maybe surprisingly there is the presence of the community in this book. It's a book about sex, it's a book about desire, and yet we see young women having their say, we see brothers having their say, we see the mother having her say, and we see the crowd around as well. Something that we totally miss in that, probably from where we have come from that whole disengaged view of sexuality in our relationship with God, is that sex is so very private and so very holy. Do not speak about it with anyone. If someone gets to their wedding night and have never heard anything about sex before, then they have done a great job. Well done, parents. You're sending your completely uneducated child into this and they have no idea what they're in for. And we say, yes. This is not what sex was intended to be like in a communal setting here. This was teaching from a young age what life is about. You know, if you have kids and you go near animals and they're having their fun, And they are making babies. Your children are going to start asking, what are they doing? Why are they doing that? Do people do that too? And the discussion begins. This is a community discussion and this community involvement. Never at any time when the man and the woman are together intimately is anyone else involved. Let me make that clear to start with. No one else is involved in that part, but there are people who come along in the sidelines and encourage the couple. You guys are doing great. There's also this mentoring element where the young woman, she has this relationship with her spouse because in this culture, there's no way they wouldn't have been married. They didn't just have lovers and everyone go, yes, that would be okay in scripture when they're unmarried. But she's married, and so she's speaking to these young women, and you see her 3 different times say, just be careful, don't rush into love. Don't rush into this kind of a relationship, guys. And she's speaking into them. So this is not just a book for married people. This is a book for all people. Because you don't suddenly become a sexual being the moment you say, I do. You see teachers of, preschool kids, and they're constantly telling kids, you need to take your hands off your pants, honey. Because it's pleasurable, it's comforting. Sexuality doesn't necessarily have to be as a sexual thing, but there is a development of sexuality and you will have all sorts of different brokenness, and we'll talk about that later, with the different ways that you may or may not have grown up to view sexuality throughout all of your years, before you even get to the point where you are engaging in sexual activity. So the mother teaches the daughter, the brothers are in charge of actually making sure that she has a good match. The crowd is there looking at this lady's young man, and they're all like, wow, she's a lucky lady. She's like, oh no. And the young women have various roles throughout the whole thing. What you will also see is that there are erotic descriptions and language in this book. What I think is so funny about this book is that there are actually points, and some of you have picked up, where you go, that's a very odd thing. This woman's belly button runs red like wine. That doesn't make any sense. Has she got some kind of disease? But they actually couldn't put in the Bible what it is. It's her vagina, because Christians would get offended by that, and there's no way they would buy that book. Ironic, yes? So when we look at it with these eyes, we go, yeah, this is not something to be shameful about. This is the human body, and God made it as a good thing. At the same time, it is not crude in any way. It is picturing this as a beautiful thing. The body is an incredible artwork by God, and relationships, sexual relationships, are a good thing. So we see in chapter 4, 6, and 7, the woman is described by the man. You see her eyes, teeth, mouth, brow, cheeks, hair, boobs, vagina, legs, all described. And the way they are described are, these are good things. And the things that he wants to do to those things are good things as well. And it's not limited to missionary position. They're good things. With the man, she also thinks he's hot, but she only describes him once, but she thinks he's epic. And she even really likes his penis. She likens it to an ivory tusk. So some commentators say, well, maybe it's really long, maybe it's really hard, maybe it's really thick. We don't know, but it's there. And we have to be okay with the fact that that's in the Bible and it's a good thing. We shouldn't be ashamed of our bodies. Yes, there's a time and place, obviously. But we need to know that it's there, and we need to know that, okay, we shouldn't be ashamed of this stuff. The amount of people that I have had to counsel as a pastor, of people who have waited for marriage, and they've gotten to marriage, and they say, I find it really hard to enjoy my sex life because I have for so many years made myself feel guilty for any sexual thought I've had, any sexual feeling I've had that is bad, 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 wrong, 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 wrong. And I get married, and then I'm supposed to enjoy this thing, and all I can think of in my head is this is bad, 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 wrong, wrong, wrong. This is not the way that we should be educating people on our sexuality. It is not how we see the Bible educating us on our sexuality. And so we need to sort of rethink this from the very beginning. This is natural, and this is good, and this is God ordained. And we can enjoy this, and we can laugh, and we can think it's funny, and we can be like, yes, it's weird. And why did God choose to make that look like that? I don't know. Funny, hey? And that's okay. All right. Even things like in 4 verse 9, he says to her, "You have captured my heart." It's also translated, "You drive me crazy." But really it is, "You excite all of me in every way. You capture my heart, my mind, my emotions, and yes, his genitals. They all, his heart rises up. So in light of, probably gone ahead and answered this in some ways as well, but give it a go for yourself. In light of chapter 5, verse 14, does Song of Songs put sex in a positive or negative light? And explain.
Yeah, that's cool. Let's see what that is.
When would that have happened? At the very beginning.
Jess, can we have a read of the different translations of 514?
Oh, yeah, that's good. How they've decided to translate it in order to avoid the obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
We can just go around.
Yeah, there's not a commentator who I've read at all, and like I said last week, I was actually lectured by Dr. Tremper Longman, who is on the translation team of the majority of the Bibles that we read. And there's not a translator alive who doesn't know that they're talking about a penis here. But you've got to kind of get around it, and let's see what we can do. So, what are some different translations of chapter 5, verse 14 that you guys have?
I've got an NIV that translates it that his body is like polished ivory.
So they've still tried to go, they're like, okay, we still have to keep it in the order, because she's going from top down, so they're like, I can't say that, so I'll say body. So still keeping
So
it.
body is meant to be penis.
Well, yes, it's meant to be, yeah.
Is anyone got a different translation?
One of them says an ivory panel.
No, his body is. Yeah.
One version of it says
The
His
waist.
waist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
but it's got probably you might do sapphires.
Yeah.
What's the message?
Oh yeah.
I do actually encourage you, because this is a poetry book, so I would actually encourage you to read something like the New Living Translation for this kind of book, because it does try and keep the poetic nature about the way that it says things. Because when we get the more literal translations, sometimes it really loses that poetic edge there.
This one says like his body is like smooth ivory, with a note that says Hebrew unclear.
It's unclear, except to everyone who knows Hebrew.
So why would the translators allow that footnote even in there? Surely if it was clear, that's putting everyone right off the scent by going, oh, it's unclear.
Yeah. It's the same reason they translate magi as the way they do. That is astrologers.
Yeah.
But Christians will be to arms up about that, and so they will translate it as magi or wise men nearly every time. Yeah.
Is there any version at all that translates it?
None of the versions, no. Because remember as well, like, it only happens on very, 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 very rare occasions. But these Bibles do need to be published. So the publishers do have to okay the translations, and they have to be able to publish a Bible that will sell to the audience, and the audience is Christian. So it's actually because of the Christian culture that this is imposed on the translators to then make it say what we want it to say, to make us not feel so uncomfortable, because we don't like talking about genitals, right? Because that can't be holy. That can't be right. That can't be in the Bible. And so that's why it's sort of gone through this whole process. So I'm hoping, like, in a few years' time, that will eventually change. But yeah, and plus on a translation team as well. Like, it's not ever one single person some translations are the main translations. You have a team of translators. So say you have 7 translators and they're all doing the same verse. And within that verse, there might be a couple of words that can be translated one way or another. And so they have to take a vote on that word. And so depending who wins the vote is which way that's translated. Usually it's a very similar thing. Unless you get like the Amplified Bible, which will stick in every single option. So that way no one person is responsible for all of it. So it's no one person's theology coming out. Yes, Sam?
Is there other things like right throughout the Bible and so things that either church in a period of time or a specific part of Christianity that they wouldn't like or they think, oh, we wouldn't do that. So are there things that we're reading right throughout that are like that?
Mostly only here in Song of Songs and with the example of astrologers in the New Testament. But apart from that, it's
That one time
relevant.
Paul's space.
Scubala.
Scubala. That one time.
Oh, Scubala, yes, that is also translated as rubbish or waste.
What does it really mean, Jess?
It means extra wasteful waste.
It means when you kick your toe.
Alright, let's move on, shall we? So the themes of the Song of Songs. If this is a whole book that's talking about sex and desire, what are we actually learning from it, apart from the fact that sex is good and that is part of God's plan? Firstly, that desire is powerful for both men and women. Have you noticed, reading this book, that it is the woman who first pursues the man on quite a number of occasions, and the book even starts with the woman pursuing the man. We say in our culture, men definitely have a higher sex drive than women. Women aren't interested in sex. We don't have to address that with women until they're married, whatever, because they don't have any, inclinations that way. That's not what this book says at all. Both men and women have sexual desire, and that sexual desire in this book is extremely powerful. It is likened to the effects of wine, where one sort of loses their mind, their sense of control. They are intoxicated by this desire to the point where sometimes they do stupid things or bold things, or they will have sometimes confident things, but it is very powerful. So from that place, some people say that's why they don't like the Book of Song of Songs, because surely that can't be a Christian, God-intended thing for us to feel so passionately and lose our mind like that. Well, God's the one who created us and created our hormones, and yes, we need to have our boundaries in there, but within those boundaries, God wants us to be free. So, desire is powerful, which is a wonderful thing to celebrate. But within there is that warning that comes. The minor theme of this book is be cautious in entering into a sexual relationship because it is so powerful and because it is is so powerful, it can do so much damage. That's the message that people need to be hearing. This is good, but this is also life-changing and strong, and your head can get lost. You know, we understand that on a cultural level. You know, he's not thinking with his head up here. We say it all the time. Well, I don't say it all the time. Lots of people say it all the time. Just to clarify. But those desires kick in and people lose their minds. And so we need to then go, okay, what do we do with that? And how do we then educate unmarried people? And that's what Song of Songs is doing with the younger women, is saying, okay, guys, you need to be cautious. Don't arouse or awaken love until the right time, because that's when damage is done. So we see so many times this garden. They're always making love in the garden. It's like they can't find a bed. They're just outside all the time. But that's because we go back to Genesis, and they're man and woman, they're created, and they're naked, and they have no shame. And then they sin, and they suddenly discover, hang on, I'm naked, and they cover themselves and feel shameful. And so what we see here in the book of Song of Songs is almost like, let's redeem what happened in the garden, and let's see how this can be made new for God's intended purposes, where a man and a woman can be in a garden naked and without shame. So you see that garden metaphor go on and on. Also, gardens are secret place, often genitals once again. Also within this redeemed sexuality, it's an exclusive relationship. There are other people in the community who are on the outskirts who cheer on or damage or help this relationship. But the woman has eyes only for the man, and the man has eyes only for the woman. And it's not just in their relationship when they're coming together that they are exclusive together. You see in this relationship that the woman is thinking only about the man. When she sees things around her, they remind her of the man. Her desire, her full body is engaged with that person she's with. It's not just a faithfulness in body, this is a faithfulness with her whole self. And the same of the man with the woman. Despite the fact that all these other women are like, wow, he's amazing, he only has eyes for her, and he seeks out only her, and he's thinking about only her. It is that exclusivity that then gets them to a place where they have this trust and this vulnerability, where then they can go do things that can only happen in a place where two people are able to trust and be vulnerable with one another.
Jess, when you talk about the community around supporting, do you mean that's represented by the Friends title?
The Friends, yep,
Okay.
young women, and also the woman says on a number of occasions, I think it's around the wedding and also maybe near the start somewhere, is about all the other women, how they look at her husband. And that actually, at some points, increases her desire, knowing that he's desirable by other people.
Yeah, because they're kind of, it's like they're leading her to be more enamoured by him or something. The questions they ask are all about. So is the point you're making that there would be people in your community that are specifically not just encouraging the relationship, but specifically speaking to like firing up your sex life or something like that?
Yeah. Tell me, it's the difference between, a group of women coming together and perving on some other guy. So common in our society today is who's your celebrity pass? Who's this person who you would sleep with if you could? And get away with it and everyone would be alright with it. Oh, it's just a joke, it's all fun and games. But all those little threads of looking outwards from the relationship to things that you desire that are not your spouse. This is in Christian circles too. Whereas this is showing that in those relationships, it should actually be, tell me about how amazing your husband is. Wow, I love when your husband does that. Isn't that awesome? You must love that he does that. And that's the sort of relationships that Christian women should be building together. They're not altogether hating on their spouses, they're actually encouraging one another in their marriages to stay faithful, not only with their bodies, but with their minds and their hearts. Tell us how awesome your husband is. Yeah. And so this trust that they get, they then lead to little like trysts that they go on. And they're like, make little plans for hookups through the day, right? So we see in chapter 1, verse 7, she goes to the man, she's like, tell me, my love, where are you leading your flock today? Where will you rest your sheep at noon? Well, why should I wander like a prostitute among your friends and their flock? She's like, I'm not going to be able to wait till 2. I'm hot for you. I've got to find you. But if I go wandering around the flocks, she's a woman by herself among the shepherds, she would look like a prostitute. She could get assaulted. It's not safe. So she's saying, I want to get to you, and it could be a little bit risky, but that kind of increases the fun. I trust you to be able to take care of me in this situation. So he says, if you don't know I'm this beautiful woman, follow the trail of my flock and graze your young goats by the shepherd's tents. You are as exciting, my darling, as a mare among Pharaoh's stallions. He's pumped that she wants him. Yeah, come meet me here. I'll meet you there. This is something that can only happen when she's really trusting him and he's really trusting her, and they're being vulnerable together, because they actually don't want everyone else involved in their relationship, but they do want to be able to sort of get together in this naughty little thing together. So within all the fun and games they have, there's also the element of, while this is a redeemed look at what sexuality could be, it's also very realistic about the challenges of sexuality in a broken world. There's elements of that there too. This is what I think is probably one of the funniest chapters of the Bible. As a married person, you may relate. Oh no, not this one. Sorry, this isn't funny. Next one. So, starting chapter 1, verse 5, this girl, this woman, she's like, my brothers are actually in charge of taking care. It's a patriarchal society. The brothers are actually supposed to be responsible for the woman, responsible for protecting her up to the point that when she gets married, and making sure that she has a good match, also making sure that she stays pure and doesn't get taken advantage of. And what they've done instead is that they've gone and made her work out in the sun so that she can get fully tanned, which they didn't like in those days, that culture. And she's like, my brothers have abused their position, and so now I'm not as beautiful as I could be. And she's actually going, a bit self-conscious about this. And then she goes, well, I know that I'm going to be able to trust you anyway. And then from that place, then he just showers her with compliments. Tells her how beautiful he finds her. That's easily relatable in our culture. I don't think there are many women out there who feel like, yes, I am 100% amazingly beautiful. And don't need their husband to go, I find you so beautiful in these specific ways. This is the funny one, all right? So the young woman says, I slept, but my heart was awake when I heard my lover knocking and calling. Open to me, my treasured darling, my dove, my perfect one. My head is drenched with dew, my hair with the dampness of the night. But I responded, I've taken off my robe. Should I get dressed again? I've washed my feet. Should I get them soiled? My lover tried to unlatch the door, and my heart thrilled within me. I jumped up to open the door for my love, and my hands dripped with perfume. My fingers dripped with lovely myrrh as I pulled back the bolt. I opened to my lover, but he was gone. My heart sank. So this seems very tame on first read until you understand that in this situation, door is actually not a physical door, it is between her legs, right? Her feet, whenever you read, uncovering her feet, talking about genitals again. So she's laying in bed, he's just come in, he's keen to go, and he's like, come on, let's go. She's like, I have just gotten ready for bed. I'm all clean. They didn't have condoms. You're going to make me so messy. I'm going to have to get up and wash again. This is going to be annoying. No, I'm not keen. He's like, come on, open up. And eventually she gets to the point where she's like, okay, I'm keen. She's so keen that she is dripping with lovely myrrh. That myrrh is going on her fingers, okay? Some people are like, oh, she's so filled with myrrh that's on her fingers. Read it in context, you figure it out. She's so keen. But he's lost interest now. She said no, so he's gone. She's like, oh, man. This is a very realistic picture of what sex can be like within marriage, right? Sometimes you're just not on the same wavelength, okay? But what happens from here is really interesting. So, the young woman, she's like, I am so ready for it. I've got to find this. Got to find him. I don't care. So she searched for him, couldn't find him anywhere, called him, there was no reply. So she is running out on the street at this point to find this guy. This desire is powerful. But the night watchman found him, the policeman, right? Keep in mind, as they made their rounds, they beat me and bruised me and stripped off my veil, those watchmen on the walls. They rape her. Make this promise, O women of Jerusalem, if you find my lover, tell him of me love. She just moves on. Okay. That is meant to be shocking. Now we need to remember that this isn't necessarily a real story. This is poetry. Okay? But this desire is so strong that she has gone and put herself in a dangerous position where someone who should have protected her has taken advantage of her. And it all began because she was denying her husband. Does that mean it's saying you must never deny your husband if he's asking for sex? No, it's saying that you need to be really careful not to use it as a power play, constantly pushing away your spouse when it comes to sex. A, it will make them go away, but also it may put your marriage in a dangerous position where someone who then is meant to be helping protect your marriage comes in and destroys it. Not only that, but she is raped in this culture, a young woman running around at night in her night clothes, more than likely not would have been raped, it wouldn't have been a big deal for them. But she does just move on. And some people live in a broken world where this is a real life event that has happened to them. Not that they've gone running after their husband and been abused by policemen, but, there has been an abuse and they've just moved on. Now, it's not saying this is the way to go, but it is saying that we need to be really careful because our sexuality as well, while it is being redeemed, and while God has a great plan, this world is a very broken world. And when we're dealing with our spouses, when we're dealing with others, we also need to be careful and cautious, knowing that some people could be coming to this place with great pain. So then this makes a new inroad. That poem's almost finished, but it leads them to a point where the women of Jerusalem go, why is he so good? And then she goes on to go, oh, he's amazing because of, and then she does her poem about how amazing her husband is. It's not all roses. Relationships must be protected. So this is probably a bit more famous within the Book of Song of Songs. Catch all the foxes, those little foxes, before they ruin the vineyard of love. The grapevines are blossoming. So they've got this young love, this garden, it's wonderful, they're exploring their sexuality together, it's fantastic. But if they're not careful, outside influences can come in and do destructive things in their relationship. And it is little foxes, there's no specific thing that might be, it could be any number of things. It's just being aware of the outside influences of your relationship that could come in and help destroy something beautiful that God intended to make. The the role of the community in the relationship. Now, this is different for today because we don't have our brothers really involved in our marriages. I know my brother didn't come up to me and go, "Hey, Dave is a good man for you. I have bartered for 10 sheep. You'll be married to him next week." Nothing like that. In this culture, that would have happened, but there is still a principle here that we can gain from this, okay? So this is near the end, and young women's brothers are talking. Now, we have a little sister, too young to have breasts, so she's still young. What should we do for our sister if someone asks to marry for her? So they're at the place, I don't think that my sister is at a place where she's actually ready for this kind of a relationship that we've been talking about. What do we do? This is relatable to us because more often than not, and hopefully we should be in a place where we're in a mentoring relationship or a parenting relationship or auntie or uncle, whatever it may be, and you've got a young person who you're in a relationship with and they think they are ready. And what do you do about that? Okay? If she is a virgin, like a wall, will protect her with a silver tower. So this is if she is wise, if she is someone who understands her sexuality, who understands her desires, is making good choices about it, and is impenetrable to the influences of the men who are trying to get to her, then awesome, will protect her with a silver tower. But if she's promiscuous, like a swinging door, hello, come in guys, we'll block her door with a cedar bar. We're actually going to take steps to protect her because she's not yet at the stage where she's protecting herself. Okay? Remember, this is a family relationship. This isn't some random person in your church coming over and going, "I think you're a bit promiscuous. I'm going to shut the door on you." The relationship is key with that. But it's helping single people to understand where they're at and the decisions they're making. And you don't see either one of these relationships them going, well, we see in our churches, you're single. Who should we put you together with? Now, I love that Josiah is back there peeking in. He's got a teacher who shared with them, he's in grade 5, about how he chose to be a bachelor for many years. I'm not sure if he still is a bachelor. And he did that because he wanted to preach the gospel and have the opportunity. And he was at a place where he could do that. Obviously, he had this stuff sorted. And so Josiah comes home and he says, "Mum, I think when I grow up I want to be a bachelor because I want to be able to work on the week and just share the news, the good news about Jesus on the weekends." I'm like, "Cool, man. If that's where you're at, that's awesome. And I'm never going to push him any which way with that. I'm never going to push him to get married." I was married at 18 and I think it was amazing. It was really hard. Really hard. Really, really hard. I love that I was married at 18. It was good. That is what God had for me at that time. For some other people, I look at some 18-year-olds and go, they decide to get married at 18. No way. There's no way I'm doing your wedding. But my parents knew me at 18 and they're like, "Yep, this makes sense." Totally. And it was okay. I was in a place where that was a good decision, but that decision is not going to be the same for everyone. And we mustn't push on our single people that they are not completed, they are not yet married. That is not okay. That's not what this is saying. This is warning. This is involved. And it requires a lot to nurture this kind of a relationship for it to be good. Okay?
Yes, you were saying before that this is like family talking to family. Like,
Yep.
What's your thoughts on that? You know, like in the church, you know, the brothers and sisters sort of in Christ sort of thing. Like, what's your place? What's your thoughts on that? Because sometimes it might be easier for a non-family person.
Yes, absolutely.
I haven't had those conversations with Andy. I probably wouldn't feel comfortable. You know?
I thought that's what we were doing next.
Probably a bit late. No, I think that our culture is quite different now. Yeah. So it probably would be that mentoring relationship or an outside person coming in and being able to do that. But at the same time, I don't yet have teenagers, but since being a youth pastor, I had the goal that I would have, and I have had many conversations with my children about sex and sexuality, relationships from a young age, age appropriate, wherever they're asking questions, because I want to be the first voice that they hear. So I want to be able to have that conversation with them and still be open to having that conversation with them no matter what age they get to. I know my mum talked to me about sex when I think I was in grade 4, way before any of my friends had heard anything about it. So anything I heard then was viewed through the filter that my mum shared with me. That's super important, because otherwise it's this little secret that you need to find something about the secret thing, and my parents aren't telling me about it, and it's naughty. And then it becomes this thing that it's not, and then when you hear, is the first thing you hear is what you think must be true, not necessarily the case. So if the parent is sort of helping that dialogue happen, you get to sort of, obviously you're going to hear other things as well, but at least know what sort of truth to filter it through. Yeah.
So is it less a culture thing and just more? Okay, obviously it's the lack of conversation amongst the family is a culture, but like that culture doesn't affect a 6 or 7-year-old the way it does like a 36 or 37-year-old. So if we just were more disciplined about doing what you're saying, just having the conversation, our kids, when they get to our age, aren't going to be sitting next to each other awkwardly in a Bible study. Oh man, this is weird sitting next to my brother listening to this kind of stuff.
Well, they really hard too, because like it's only our culture that has everyone in their own bedroom.
Yes.
You know, like most
absolutely.
cultures have 2 rooms in a house. You know, and so everyone sleeps in one room. You know, so kids
You're going to see what happens.
things
Yeah.
from a very early age, so it's not a secret.
Even
you know,
with
they
them,
would be
you get
seeing
walking.
the animals doing it, and like you said, you know, kids that grow up on a farm, they know about sex from a very early age. They're seeing all the animals doing it.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's just our culture where we hide it.
Yes.
You know, we you know.
And because it's hidden, then it automatically is something to be hidden because it's shameful. Yeah. Which needs to be a different approach. Yeah. But also remember in this relationship as well, if a woman is not a virgin when she gets married, she is worth less. Remember the society that they're growing up with. So they're not only protecting her just for now because of the consequences of like she might get pregnant, but also protecting her within the whole society, her reputation, her rest of her life. So there's much more at stake for the woman if she's going to be promiscuous than say there would be even in our culture today. So that is where that's a bit different. That's their job, and what she does actually reflects directly on their ability to be a good brother or not. Whereas we don't really have that so much. So it does talk about love as well. Right? So you see, this is in the context of a loving relationships, but it is primarily focused on sex. Okay? But we do learn about love. And this is probably one of the most famous passages out of this, and often used way out of context, which is hilarious, but it is speaking about love, and this is the one point where people go, did God actually maybe mention here when it says love flashes like a fire? That's similar wording to like the fire or presence of God. Okay, so the young woman says to the man, I aroused you under the apple tree where your mother gave you birth, where in great pain she delivered you. Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm, for love is as strong as death. Its jealousy as enduring as the grave. Love flashes like fire, the brightest kind of flame. Many waters cannot quench love, nor can rivers drown it. If a man tried to buy love with all his wealth, his offer would be utterly scorned. And so that is the context of this relationship that they're having. And that's pretty beautiful, really. I think that's our things they've seen. You're like, oh. I think it's funny reading it, finding all the different things that they think are aphrodisiacs that we wouldn't find that way today. Like, oh, the mandrake. And everyone's like, what? You know, it puts people to sleep, but we didn't realise that they would find that so sexy.
Do you think that it speaks into roles of men and
I think in some ways it does with the protection element, but in other ways it speaks very differently to what we would normally have seen as like the man is the leader, because the woman is very much in charge of her own sexuality in this as well. And that they both are sexual beings and they have to come together and work together to make it work. So in that way, it's kind of like saying, this isn't the responsibility of any one partner. You have to work at this together to make it work. Yeah.
Do you reckon like Israel would have sort of grown up with the full understanding of that? Like written as it's written.
Yes.
And then, so when did that change? When did it sort of become? So if Israel's sort of grown up going, okay, and they've taught their kids and stuff like that, it's all fine, it's out in the open.
Yeah.
When did it become?
Yeah, when did it change?
Yeah.
Yes, I think a lot of commentators will say it's usually around the time where Greek thinking sort of entered the place, and also that deistic thinking with the separation of spirit and body, and Plato coming in and saying this is an evil thing, whereas it can't be a spiritual thing.
Was that before or after Jesus?
It was before and after Jesus. Like it sort of was that whole time period. Yeah. Because you don't really see it questioned or spoken about too much until 100 AD. And you go, whoa, how did they get there? But you see the ways in thinking just previously to that, people begin thinking sex is something best avoided unless you have to make babies. Yeah.
I feel like it's still like how it represents Christ in the church. Like Christ being the mother and
Yeah.
church being
Yes,
the
totally. Because when you see like her describing this man, saying, look how awesome this man is, he's got a great penis, and you're like, whoa, that is not okay to be talking about Jesus like that, okay? Totally one of the best arguments for the fact that it can't be allegorical. What it's talking about when we're learning about that is that this marriage, the intimacy within this marriage, the trust that they have for one another, their sort of single-focused attention that they have on one another, that's the sort of relationship that we should have with Christ. And as a church, we should be keeping ourselves wholly focused on what He wants and God's pleasure, not our own, and not a sexual pleasure, but a whole of our being going, God, I'm yours, sort of surrender and trust. So that element to it, and that's why it's a smaller tick, because it's not like you'd say to God, let's go meet in the garden together. Like that's wrong, totally wrong. But there is the trust and the love that underlies and underpins this kind of a relationship that should be alive in our relationship with God, where we say, I trust you wholly and completely, and even when I don't see myself perfectly the way you see me, I should see myself that way, and I'll put my safety in your hands, I'll put my future in your hands, and I will pursue you doggedly with everything I am.
compare the other things there as well, like little boxes.
Yeah.
Getting in the way or like things distracting you.
Absolutely. The exclusivity of that relationship, yeah. There's nothing else. Because those are the only exclusive relationships that we do see in Scripture, is the husband and the wife, and God and people.
Is it more like this informs us about marriage? So Song of Songs informs us about marriage, and marriage as an illustration informs us about our relationship as a church with Jesus.
Yeah.
So the link isn't necessarily a direct one. It's just that this is a biblical picture of marriage, and with a biblical picture of marriage, when a New Testament writer refers to it as an illustration, it's like we have a proper image in our mind of that
Yes.
illustration.
And it is more likely that they're not necessarily thinking of Song of Songs when they're thinking of that relationship, because that relationship is made clear, you know, the marriage link in plenty of other books that would have been probably written back out. But yeah, because this is speaking about a marriage relationship, there are elements to it that can inform us. Yeah,
And Jesus and the church
Yeah.
did not exist.
exactly. So it couldn't have been written for Jesus and the church, because it would have made no sense whatsoever to them reading it then. And, like I said, it would be completely irreverent as well.
Jess, has anyone tried to do a more literal translation then?
Not that I know of, I just know when you read a commentary, it will give you the information.
Did you say that because of that description of the man penis, they sometimes don't see the book as allegorical?
No, we shouldn't, because of it's part of that description, because it would be very weird, because some people would say, okay, this is allegorical, and when the young women are saying, tell us why this man is so amazing, they're saying, the people in the world are asking, why is Jesus so good? And they're saying, Jesus is so good, but then replying with this very physical description of Jesus. And you go, that's kind of at a place where I'm not sure if Jesus would be okay being described like that as a world, come and see Jesus. He's so amazing looking, physically appealing as a naked man, yeah. They'll still go there if they do that, but it is very
I'm still having trouble finding how it says the penis. Like,
Yeah.
is that translated from the original, whatever it was?
yeah. Yeah. So there is another instance where it's translated similarly. Do you remember where that was? Oh, it was Solomon, wasn't it? No, the advisors talking about Solomon.
Oh, I thought, Solomon's thumb.
So it's like Solomon's thumb is as big as whoever's.
Remember Rehoboam, so Solomon's king, and his son gets a chance to take the throne, and his son's advisors say, hey, listen, your dad's been pretty hard with taxes, why don't you win the people over, tell them that you're going to cut taxes and just lay it off. And so his son Rehoboam goes and has a chat with his mates, and his mates go, nah, double down. And so Rehoboam says, you thought that my dad was harsh? Well, my thumb is thicker than his waist. That's what he says. It really means my penis. But again, it's like, yeah. So it's like, because the crazy thing is there are modern euphemisms today which we wouldn't use in church that are very similar. Like if someone wants to impress someone, and I'm not trying to be crude, but you might hear it said, it's like it's a penis swinging contest. That's what's you may not have heard that. I've not heard it in different circles maybe. But it's like, I'm trying to... Chook was the one that's saying it. But it's like, let me show you how impressive I am, Con. All right? And look, I'm sure most of you have heard it, but instead of penis, it might have started with dead. It's a similar concept. The Bible is describing somebody saying something inappropriate, which it does all the time. It's just that because it's got sexual, well, not even connotations, it is explicitly sexual. For whatever reason, our translators are balking at it. I'm trying to find an article to critique why translators do that. The translators just say, well, we do it because of the audience. And at least they're being honest, but I would have thought they might have given some other excuse as well. So, yes, it's in verse 14, the body, the word that they translate as body, or waist, yep, or loins. I know there are some translations. That's the Hebrew word that if it was translated out literally, it would be penis. Yep. Same with the belly button and vagina.
Yeah.
obviously in this sense, as though it's not euphemism. It's and crude. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Really good thing to be able to say it. And even though Jess hasn't asked you guys to, I think I might have mentioned last year, we all just said it, and it was amazing how everyone giggled immediately. And we had 80-year-olds right down to 18-year-olds. Everyone giggled, which is like, I don't know, it's kind of sad. I remember being in biology in high school and giggling. That's fine. I was 15. But it's like, we've got to get to a point as the church who are meant to be, we're not meant to be. We have the opportunity to be the truthful voice into this topic. And there is a whole book of the Bible dedicated to this topic. And silence. Just silence. And then we get nervous about the statistics that run through youth in the church that mirror that of like secular society. That, kids are sleeping together and kids are doing all kinds of weird stuff to each other, and the reason that's happening is because they've been educated by like a corrupted teacher. Yeah. So I do a course called Being a Bloke and Beyond the Mascara with a group called Peer Power Australia up in Brisbane. And one of the alarming statistics that I didn't discover this, but the head of the organisation, Michael Knight, found out was that that anal tearing in teenage girls is skyrocketing. Not because of rape. So whatever you think about that, there is at the end of every class that when we do these seminars, we give all the kids a piece of paper and ask for some detailed feedback. Something that you didn't like and why, something you did like and why. And a girl in grade 11 wrote, anonymously, they don't put their names to it, I never knew that being hit whilst having sex wasn't okay. So, the education that these guys are getting, this is from a Christian school, mind you. So, yeah, Glenn?
You know how, with the church like an Acts, so would they have, we're so sort of far removed from talking about normal within Christianity. Would the early church in Acts have sort of spoken about this sort of, just would be kind of plastic, because they were all Jews, they kind of would have understood it was all God, and they kind of, the kids would have grown up with it. When did Christianity, or religion as we know it now, when did it become so sort of like that, like Victorian almost, like it was so, now, what I'm sort of saying is, was it right, in Acts it was okay to talk like that, and then we could work everybody kind of understood each other. Whereas now, people see us, if you tell someone you're a Christian, they instantly think of you as that person who never does anything wrong, never's going to talk about sex because sex is wrong. Like they see us through this lens of what people think Christianity is, and when they come across it, they realise it's nothing like that. When did the church, as we know it, become like that? Go from fully understanding this, let's call it something other than what it is.
It's hard to say because we don't know at which point it switched over to that understanding. Obviously, Jesus would have understood it as it was meant to have been written, but Jesus himself wasn't married. Many of the disciples, Paul wasn't married. Peter doesn't talk about his sex life, but they are in a culture where they're dealing with other issues, such as don't partake in the orgies that are happening on the mountain in worship of these gods. Christians don't do that. So they're going back to those sorts of lessons. And we don't know at which point it actually switched over to sort of taking on that. But yeah, it's obviously at least around their culture by 100 AD, but we don't know how long it took for the Christians to jump on that as well.
I don't think it was particularly good for women in the Bible time, in the New Testament times, in Acts, because, they were still they were not free, they were second-class citizens, weren't they?
Within their culture. Yeah, not necessarily so, but Jesus was so countercultural.
But
But yes, like there was still that culture was horrific. Yeah.
Our own.
Yes, you were owned, and marriage meant very little.
Yeah.
You were a piece of property, but your husband was expected to never be faithful. So there was a whole different set.
And the problems in the churches were related to, you know,
Yes.
their backgrounds, the
Yeah.
Gentiles especially.
Yeah.
That, you know, the problems in the churches were not good.
Yeah. Not okay to sleep with your family members, sort of deal. Yeah. It does reference Solomon in the same way that Solomon is associated with Ecclesiastes. He is associated and he's mentioned as a song, as a part of the wedding, which is, this is amazing, we should celebrate marriage and weddings. Royal weddings is the pinnacle wedding because it is a royal wedding, and therefore everything that has to do with marriage and sex and love, we should be celebrating as a community. So, oh, totally, yeah. Yeah. But that's where it's like the association comes with the grandness of his weddings as opposed to how great a husband he was. You'd want to hope he somewhat satisfied some of those women, but it didn't really give that indication. So yeah, it's that's where that association lies. The same way someone would write a song about someone famous today doesn't mean that person who's writing it is that person or even trying to be that person, but it's something about yeah. It's a song that's poetry.
That's time. So, you know, our prayer all year has been that as we move through the scriptures, or at least my prayer has been that we would, as God reveals more of himself, we'd fall more in love with him and with our community so that we could better love others and God. And so my challenge to us all this week is to intentionally pursue good, healthy conversations around sex. Start with people you're comfortable with. It might just be your husband or your wife, but don't be surprised if that's even really awkward, because, well, you don't have time to go into all of that. But if you can, I think it would be really good to try and step outside your comfort zone and engage in the conversation about good, healthy sexuality with either friends or potentially family members. I'm not going to talk to you about it, Sam. Sorry. But if you've got kids or something like that, because it's no good us coming to a fresh revelation of a book like this, and I think a stark contrast to what we've maybe been thinking or just never thought about, and then just to go, oh, that was interesting. All right, next, let's get to Isaiah. So yeah, that's my challenge. Give it a crack, because I think the church needs to get up on the front foot with this sort of stuff.
And it's just interesting, like how, I don't know what the relationship is, but I mean the problem with pornography today, and like how, I mean that's just obviously undoing so many people, you know, and maybe there's a bit of a scare to not talk about sex, and then there's been obviously the whole Royal Commission into, you know, misuse of sex and minors, and it's just, I mean, I can understand it's a really hard space for church leaders to speak into a lot of the time as well. But I don't know. Just so much really terrible stuff is wrapped up in something which is meant to be obviously so really good as well.
So there's an excellent book that I recommend. I don't enjoy all of the way that it's written, but there's a lot of good stuff in there, and it's called God Loves Sex. And it's by Tremper Longman, who's a Bible scholar, who's written quite a few commentaries on Song of Songs. But it's co-written by a guy, I think, called Dan Alama, who's actually a Christian psychologist. And so it comes from the angle of how do we make this, what's the physiological and psychological an emotional impact of our culture today when meeting the teachings of Song of Songs, and how do we flesh that out together, because none of us are unbroken when we come to our sexuality. We all have had, in some measure, shape or form, some element where the world has given us a skewed perception or a skewed desire or a skewed way of going about things when it comes to our sexuality. And how do we actually navigate that? And even starting to do some of those conversations and what that's going to look like. So that's a book I recommend if you're sort of thinking about, where do I even start with this? It sort of addresses a lot of that stuff as well.
Thanks, Jess. Champion. So next week we are on to Isaiah. We take 2 weeks to do Isaiah. So in your learning guides and email tomorrow, or if it turns up on Wednesday, it'll instruct you as to which chapters to read. Because we're doing 2 weeks on Isaiah, if you manage to read it all in 1 week, that'd be really good, because then we do a class and you can go back with that new context and go through it again. But if you can't, I'll divvy it up and that stuff will arrive in email in video form tomorrow or Wednesday.